Tonight from the Middle East, the CBS News exclusive, one-on-one with a defiant Saddam Hussein.
Any official.
Will you destroy those missiles?
And if he does not, President Bush says, disarm fully now or it's war.
Also tonight, more war-worried Americans are voting no confidence in the struggling U.S. economy. And a wicked winter ice storm in a very unlikely place.
This is the CBS Evening News, with Dan Rather reporting tonight from Amman, Jordan, and John Roberts in New York.
Good evening from the Middle East, where in this part of the high desert there's several feet of snow, and where war now may be weeks or less away. President Bush today again warned Iraq there's only one way to avoid war, and that is, quote, full disarmament. But Saddam Hussein remained defiant. As I got together with the Iraqi president in one of his palaces in Baghdad for an exclusive, wide-ranging interview.
Mr. President, do you intend to destroy the Al-Samud missiles that the United Nations prohibits?
Our commitment is to abide, to comply with the 1441 resolution and to apply it. As you know, Iraq is allowed to manufacture land-to-land rockets as per the resolution of the United Nations.
I want to make sure that I understand, Mr. President. So you do not intend to destroy these missiles?
Which missiles? What do you mean? We have no missiles outside the specifications of the United Nations, and the inspection teams are here and they're looking. I believe the United States knows, and the world knows, that Iraq has none of what has been said at the higher political levels. So the missiles you are talking about, the missiles that are against the resolutions of the United Nations, these do not exist, and they have been destroyed.
What's the most important thing you want the American people to understand at this important juncture of history?
First, that you tell them that the Iraqi people are not the enemy of the American people. If the American people want to know more through dialogue, through television screens, I'm ready to dialogue with Bush, with Mr. Bush, the President of the United States, and to appear together before the television.
Are you speaking of a debate?
Yes, that's it. We are not asking for a contest with weapons. All I'm asking is to appear before the American people and other people in a direct discussion. This is an opportunity for him, if he is really convinced about his position, about preparations for war or any other means, to convince the whole world about the reasons that justify war. And it's an opportunity for us to tell the world about our reason to want to live in peace.
This is not a joke.
Not at all. I'm not joking. This is because of my respect for the American public opinion. Conducting a dialogue could bring peace. Why not go and have a debate?
The White House has said no to any debate. As for those Al-Samud 2 missiles, Chief UN Inspector Hans Blix insists Iraq does have them and must destroy them. Now a word about my interview with Saddam Hussein. The videotaping was done by Iraqi television crews, which has long been standard practice for Saddam, for one thing, to prevent assassination attempts. The Iraqis returned to CBS News a tape that combined all 3 camera feeds into one. CBS News checked, and as far as we can determine, the content of the nearly 3-hour interview is intact and was not censored by the Iraqis. You can see more of the interview first thing tomorrow on The Early Show and on a special edition of 60 Minutes 2, tomorrow night at 9, 8 Central. That in a war with Iraq, Saddam and his top lieutenants would become individual targets for the U.S. military. And as CBS's Bill Plant reports tonight, the chances of avoiding war appear to be near the vanishing point.
President Bush laid it on the line today, suggesting military action against Iraq is all but inevitable when he was asked what it would take to avoid war.
There's only one thing, there's full disarmament. The man has been told to disarm. For the sake of peace, he must completely disarm.
And Mr. Bush predicted Iraq would continue to play games for time. In fact, Iraq has informed Chief UN Weapons Inspector Hans Blix it has discovered documents showing it destroyed some biological agents and that it has found a bomb capable of carrying bioweapons. Asked if this amounted to progress, Blix said yes.
Yes, there are some elements that are positive and which need to be explored further.
The administration derided the new discovery as dribs and drabs and no more than another attempt at delay.
Lo and behold, as the pressure grows, new documents are produced. Lo and behold, as the pressure grows, they find weapons when they said they didn't have any.
The president also made it very clear that even though the U.S. has gone back to the UN and would like to have international support for military action against Iraq, a no vote won't stop the war. Bill Plant, CBS News, the White House.
Here in Amman, Jordan, we are 500 miles from Baghdad, but this story encompasses a vast region. It stretches east and south to Kuwait and the Persian Gulf, and north to Turkey, where CBS's Richard Roth reports lawmakers are being asked to defy public opinion by supporting the United States.
If its parliament approves the deal, Turkey now says it will let 62,000 American troops deploy here for at least 6 months to fight a war in Iraq. But Turkey's foreign minister tonight said he hopes the threatened deployment will make Saddam back down.
When I put myself in the shoes of Saddam, he will have to choose between his own skin and agree to a peaceful solution.
But if there's war, Turkey and the U.S. have now agreed thousands of Turkish troops will march into Iraq behind the Americans, into semi-autonomous Kurdistan, where the Turkish armies deeply resent it. America sees the Kurds as allies against Saddam. Turkey regards them as a terror threat, and tonight says it has an American understanding that after a war, the Kurds would be disarmed.
We do not want to see people being armed there or capture the towns which is rich in oil fields.
That's sure to anger the Kurds, but it could help tip the balance for the crucial vote in parliament here, still in doubt despite America's promise of billions in aid to Turkey. Will they be permitted to deploy through Turkey?
God only knows that.
The answer will decide what the marching orders will be for American troops, tanks, and armor waiting on ships tonight 60 miles off Turkey's coast. Richard Roth, CBS News, Ankara.
A U.S. Army helicopter crashed today in Kuwait, killing all 4 crewmen on board. The Black Hawk helicopter was on a pre-dawn training mission near the Army's Camp New Jersey. There were sandstorms in the area, but the cause of the crash has not been officially determined. Anti-war activists from the United States and other nations have traveled to Iraq to act as human shields in the event of war. I'll have that story for you later in the broadcast. John Roberts is at the anchor desk back home and has more of the day's news. John?
Thank you, Dan, and good evening from New York, where the stock market managed a modest gain today. The Dow rising 51 points, the NASDAQ a little more than 6. That was despite a troubling report showing consumer confidence in the U.S. economy taking the 5th largest one-month drop on record. Anthony Mason is on the Market Watch tonight.
The mood of American consumers hasn't been this grim in nearly a decade.
I used to spend too much, so you got to watch it now.
The Consumer Confidence Index sank last month under worries about unemployment, oil prices, and Iraq.
And with the war pending and looming, it just keeps things on the depressed side.
The prospect of war is infecting the economy. It sent oil prices up again today, and drivers are feeling the pinch at the pump.
Looking at the cost of gas, I plan carefully where I'm going to go.
Put on 20,000 Abercrombie at 24. The stock market isn't going anywhere. The Dow has dropped back below 8,000.
What is the market telling us?
The market is telling us that Iraq is a huge albatross.
Liz Ann Saunders is chief stock strategist for Charles Schwab.
Until we get a resolution, it's not going to help the stock market, and related to that, it's not going to help the economy.
And ordinary investors are worried.
I don't have good feelings about it at all. In fact, I'm here to take my money out of stocks.
Today, Margaret Jelsich was moving her retirement money into less risky investments.
I have no confidence that the market is going to go up.
The threat of conflict has left a cloud of uncertainty over the economy.
This is a huge wild card. We just don't know what's going to be going on in a few months' time, and that's why business capital spending and a lot of Wall Street activity is on hold for the meantime.
So far, the impact may be mostly psychological, but Iraq has made the stock market and the economy prisoners of war. John?
Anthony Mason reporting live tonight. Anthony, thanks. Flying home tonight from Asia, Secretary of State Colin Powell told reporters that despite recent threats, North Korea has not yet restarted its nuclear weapons program. Powell said 2 key North Korean facilities, a reactor and a plutonium reprocessing plant, remain offline. But as Barry Peterson reports, the North still picked a day of celebration in South Korea to shake things up.
The gunfire was symbolic, honoring South Korea's new president as Secretary of State Colin Powell watched. But North Korea jangled nerves with a real weapon, firing a short-range missile about 40 miles into the sea just hours before the inauguration. And there was more from the North Korean propaganda machine, a claim that U.S. spy planes are collecting data for what the North called a prelude to war. U.S. officials say they don't respond to such reports from the North.
There was a time when that sort of saber rattling was dismissed because the United States and South Korea presented a united front. And that's what Powell's visit here was meant to show. But as this crisis gets worse, that front is starting to crack.
The country's new president won the election promising to stand up to an America that people here say still treats South Korea like a poor relative, not a successful nation with a world-class economy. And he recently said his country would no longer take any bossing, his word, from the U.S. Even more, he opposes the option of using American force against the North, even though it's still a possibility, says the Secretary of State.
What I said to President No was that you cannot ever remove an option that is always available to you.
Which may be why North Koreans are drilling for air raids. Powell keeps talking about diplomacy, but the North keeps hearing threats of war. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Seoul.
Coming up next on tonight's CBS Evening News, highways turn into slideways. A dangerous ice storm makes driving look more like sledding in the northern plains. The mid-Atlantic states are bracing for a fresh blast of snow and sleet tomorrow, and heavy rain could hit the deep south. In parts of the plains and the south today, snow and sleet are already piled high, with Dallas looking like an ice palace. Bob McNamara is on the CBS Weather Watch.
Horsepower had little to do with moving across North Texas. The Dallas-Fort Worth rush hour ran at 3 speeds: a crawl, a creep, and a slow skid. The icy going was so treacherous, interstates were shut down in much of Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas.
Anything's got pavement out here pretty much has ice on it.
Most schools took a holiday, as did government employees. And many businesses that were open hardly did business at all.
I've had phone calls, but no one come in, so.
At Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, most morning flights were canceled. Terminals turned into campgrounds. Afternoon flights that were going were delayed by de-icing. The biggest problem was getting a cab to the airport.
I started calling about 6:30 this morning and finally got one about 10 o'clock. Missed my flight by 10 minutes.
While the Texas soundtrack of the day was a shovel on ice and donuts in a parking lot, going for lunch was dicey.
We had to go get some tamales for our employees at the office.
In Tennessee, the storm brought highway havoc again, in a state where winter snowfall amounts are double what they normally are. Accidents with injuries around Nashville shut down Interstate 65. Forecasters say the only way out of this Texas weather is to fly out. That while the brunt of the storm may have moved on east, there is another storm just like it that could arrive as early as tonight. Bob McNamara, CBS News, Dallas.
A grand jury reportedly will convene in Rhode Island tomorrow to investigate last week's nightclub fire that killed almost 100 people. Members of the rock band Great White say they have been subpoenaed to testify about the fire ignited by their indoor fireworks display. They say they had permission for fireworks, but club owners deny that. This could be a big factor in determining who's to blame for the blaze. Still ahead on the CBS Evening News tonight, the Coast Guard is piped in as a new part of the Department of Homeland Security. Its new focus, securing America's ports. The mission, up next. In the Shuttle Columbia investigation, CBS News has learned a videotape recovered from the wreckage shows the crew inside the cabin shortly before the shuttle broke up high over Texas. The tape offers no clue to the cause of the tragedy, showing the crew heading for home, apparently unconcerned. In Washington today, there were ceremonies heralding the transfer of the U.S. Coast Guard from the Transportation Department to the new big Department of Homeland Security, a change reflecting the Guard's added responsibilities. Bob Orr reports on the serious circumstance behind today's pomp.
Patrolling New York Harbor off the tip of Manhattan, the Coast Guard is surrounded by potential danger.
All right, keep a good visual on him.
Huge container ships capable of concealing weapons of mass destruction, oil tankers which could become floating bombs. And patrols are constantly watching for boats approaching any of 100 possible terrorist targets. Bridges, the Statue of Liberty, and the ferries which carry more than 19 million passengers a year.
Where before it may have been perceived as a tourist, now we consider any sort of concern, we respond.
17 cameras monitor the harbor, and computer profiling helps single out potential threats.
By identifying the vessels, the owners, and the cargoes where they came from, what's being carried, we're able to target our inspections and examinations.
Port security, in part, can be measured by things that haven't happened. Since 9/11, there have been no terrorist incidents in U.S. waters. And the captain of the Port of New York says he has no doubt interventions have prevented some attacks. That prevention effort doesn't stop at the water's edge.
This is a shipment that arrived out of the Middle East.
Chief Customs Inspector Kevin McCabe says 90% of his resources now are aimed at stopping terrorists.
Before 9/11, the contraband was almost always narcotics. Post 9/11, the major focus and almost the primary focus is definitely looking for anti-terrorism type targets, weapons of mass destruction, or components of weapon.
Highly suspect containers are checked for radiation and run through giant X-ray systems to help inspectors spot any sign of danger. So far, none has been found. But for Customs and the Coast Guard, the terrorism watch goes on.
We are right here, the last line of defense.
Here, just across the water from Ground Zero, no one needs to be reminded of the risk. Bob Orr, CBS News, New York.
And that's the news from here at home tonight. I'm John Roberts in New York. In a moment, Dan Rather in the Middle East will tell you how the Americans and others in these red buses in Baghdad hope to prevent a war with Iraq.
Dozens of Westerners and others are in Baghdad tonight. They arrived over the weekend determined to try to stop a U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. How do they plan to do it? Well, they got the idea from Saddam Hussein. It was an unforgettable scene from the first Gulf War. Saddam Hussein greeting a group of foreign captives. The most visible hostage, a 5-year-old British boy named Stuart Lockwood. They were called the Human Shields, and they were placed at critical Iraqi sites to prevent attacks. An outraged world came to their rescue. Relentless pressure forced the Iraqis to set them free before the 1991 invasion. But things could be different this time. These people promised to volunteer as human shields, putting their bodies, they say, between bombs and the Iraqi people.
I'll be here until the bombs drop.
Among the 100 or so who have volunteered, 26-year-old Ryan Clancy is among 15 camping out inside a Baghdad power plant. Clancy is a high school English teacher from Wisconsin, and he's left one troubled family behind.
My mother, her first reaction was, I'm incredibly proud of you. Her second reaction was concern for my safety.
Things did not go as well with his father.
My father went the other way. He accused me of siding with the enemy and pretty much called me a terrorist. That was the last call that I made before I left the States.
So now he's here with an odd collection of activists, young and old, most from Europe, some Asian. They're drinking Pepsis and singing protest songs, holding out a slim hope that their presence might make a difference.
I'm not sure that war is ever justified, and I am sure that at any point diplomacy can be used to reach a solution. And I don't think that it's too late for that here and now.
Not too late, but time does grow short. Part of our world tonight. Dan Rather reporting from Amman, Jordan. We invite you to join us again tomorrow for the CBS Evening News. From the Middle East, good night.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com, AOL keyword CBS News. The Saddam Interview. Further details and reaction tomorrow. Experience CBS News.